Warning! This show contains material that some listeners may find troubling, including discussions of intense horror movie themes, explicit language, movie spoilers, and women speaking. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, horror fans. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Eleanor.
And welcome to Horror Sandbox, the podcast where we dig around in horror films and see what we can unearth.
That's right. But before we get started today, Charlie, can we talk about how we're coping with the horrors? Because I think we are both coping with the horrors the same way.
We are. I think we are. And yes, I want to talk about something very bad is going to happen. Let's talk about it, please.
I loved so much about this show, but I think the thing that made it extra delicious for me is that you and I actually started and finished it at approximately the same time, and that basically never happens except for the things we do for the show.
100%. It was so, yeah, because I was like, I didn't even plan on finishing it literally yesterday, and I was like, just binged it. I couldn't stop, and I texted you, and I was like, I need you to finish this so I could talk to you about it. And you were like, I just did, which was amazing. But it was
so
gosh,
good.
It was so good. What I like about horror like movies and shows is that I like to watch the symbolism behind the scenes to like figure out what's going on or what's going to happen or guess what's going to happen next. And at no point during the show did I even have a good guess.
Yes,
what was gonna happen.
I love a good you don't know what's about to happen even though we've tricked you into thinking you do show or movie.
Yes.
Absolutely love that. The title of the show, Something Very Bad is Going to Happen, that is just how I have described my own dealings with feelings of anxiety. When she explains some of her similar feelings, I was just like, oh yeah, I get that. I totally connect with this.
Absolutely. Like when I have a fear of flying. So like when she just refuses to get on the plane because she's sure it's going to crash, which really isn't a spoiler for anyone who hasn't watched the show. Gosh, I just related to that so hard. I mean, I loved that main character. I loved all the acting, and it was so good because everybody was so good and you just couldn't tell who was good, who was bad, whose intentions were what. It was just also like weird and off, but the vibes were perfect and I just loved it. It was a really
and it's
good watch.
beautifully filmed. Like it's very beautiful. My husband's obsessed with there's a mystical kind of a figure, the one that she meets in the dive bar. My husband's obsessed with him and I can see why. And that was all really cool. And there's also some things they don't directly explain them in the show that I feel like it's left unpackaged for you on purpose so that your mind just kind of keeps going back to like, what were they trying to do there? What did that mean? What is that?
Yes.
And I did kind of like that. That often annoys me, but I thought the specific way that they did a couple of those things in the show was pretty good. And I know we're being super vague, but we're just celebrating this beautiful piece of art and not trying to ruin it for anybody who hasn't seen it yet.
Yes, since you didn't click the show titled Something Very Bad is Going to Happen, we didn't want to spoil it for you. So
yeah,
you're welcome. But yeah, go watch it, listeners. It's good. Okay, Eleanor, tell us what we're digging into today.
We watched Hereditary. This is the 2018 film. IMDb summary is a grieving family is haunted by tragic and disturbing occurrences. The writer-director is Ari Aster. It stars Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, Millie Shapiro, and Gabriel Byrne. Now, we can't dig around in a horror sandbox without our trusty, rusty tools, can we, Charlie? So tell me what your Bloody Shovel Award is.
Okay, so I'm obsessed with this movie. It's probably my favorite movie of all time, and my Bloody Shovel is that this is the most delicious layer cake of a movie ever. And I will talk about all of its amazing layers when we get to the end of this podcast, but it's just so beautiful. I love it so much.
I think that you're correct, but I have to know, Red Velvet?
You know, I am a sucker for just a traditional like chocolate.
Good
Maybe
chocolate?
a cheesecake.
Can you layer a
fudgy.
cheesecake?
I think you can, like a fudge layer, strawberry
Oh, okay.
layer. I mean, haven't you ever been to the Cheesecake Factory? They got layers.
Are those still a thing?
They are. They are. Though I haven't been to one in about a decade.
I thought millennials killed all the chain restaurants. I was reading about that a lot in like just a few years ago.
We did. Eleanor, what is your bloody shovel?
This for me was the best second watch. I had seen this movie probably right after it came out. I remember watching it. I remember liking it. I remember having questions and then not ever watching it again until we did it for the show. And there is, kind of like you said, every scene has just layers of meaning and stuff going on and questions and answers to questions you didn't know you were asking. And watching it the second time, quite frankly, took me forever because I kept having to pause, but it was really good, and it made the experience that much better.
Yes, I'm so excited to tell you about all of those layers and all the things you missed that you thought you had figured out. It's going to be so good.
Okay, well, let's do it. So the first scene opens with an obituary for Ellen Taper Lee, who died at the age of 78 after a long illness. She died in her mother's home, and from this obituary, we also learn that she had a husband and a son who preceded her in death.
And can I pause this already to say that this movie is so brilliantly written that it just in the opening like text alone, it gives you so much information, and it's something that you immediately recognize. Like you look at it, the way it's written, it's layered like it's in a newspaper column, so you know you're looking at an obituary, and as you look at it, you see that the vast majority of the members of the family are deceased, so that is already hinting at there's something hereditary that travels through this family that causes them to die early. So
yeah, and you kind of linger on the obituary for a while. So it's not just like a lot of establishing shots are just somebody's dead and it's relevant to the plot a little bit. It's very slow. So it's like, pay attention. You may need this information later.
Exactly.
So we see a view of an amazing tree house through an interior window. Did you think this looked like Baba Yaga's hut?
Any like treehouse hut thing with legs looks like Baba Yaga's hut to me. But yes, I did see that a little bit. There's some really cool design actually of that treehouse, and you actually find out at the end that treehouse is hell, or at least a representation of hell. So it's pretty cool. But there's also if you look at the way the beams are made on it, there's a rune, and it's the rune of light. So already so much symbolism, and we're 2 seconds into this movie,
right? Yeah. It pans into a shot of a home art studio, and there are miniature detailed rooms that are being made here. It's like a creator's studio. And we close in on a shot of a teenager's bedroom, and then some eerie music starts to play.
Yeah. And so when we get to the end, we're going to revisit this. But if you pay close attention to those dollhouses, there's 4 of them. The first 3 represent Annie's various traumas from her childhood. And the movie has already set up the entire background for you before it's even started.
Which is amazing.
It's so good.
And that creepy music that is playing during the shot, it's this wild, like, rhythmic kind of rapping or scratching noise. And it is not anything like that kind of iconic sinister music, but it made me feel the same way.
Yeah, and you know what? It definitely has that same like creepy feeling to it. I agree with that for sure.
Yeah. Atmospheric or something. I don't know. It's doing its job, I guess. Yeah. So the miniature room turns real, and now it's an actual teenager in his actual room. This is Peter. His dad brings in a suit and asks if he knows if his sister slept in her own room. And then the dad goes into the treehouse where he finds Charlie, who is the sister, who did not sleep in her room.
Yes. And I think 2 things are happening here. One, if it's like our first hint that maybe these parents aren't the best parents because the dad doesn't even know where his daughter slept. Like if my daughter walked out in the middle of the night, I would be pretty freaked out. And then the other thing is that when it zooms into Peter's room, like you said, it's coming from the dollhouse into the real room. That view of the family as if they're in a dollhouse travels throughout the whole movie. So if you go back and rewatch this, kind of look for that symbolism, and I'll talk about the importance of it at the end. But it's throughout the whole movie. It's a very important point of it.
Can't wait. So the family travels to the grandmother's funeral. her daughter, that's Toni Collette's character, makes a reference to seeing a bunch of strange new faces in the audience.
Yes, and those strange new faces will become very familiar by the end of the movie because you will see them quite a lot, especially in the background if you're paying attention.
Ooh, okay. So in the eulogy, Annie talks about her mother being very private, with private rituals and private friends. The guests look a lot older, and they also look pretty wealthy to me. There's one shot where Charlie, Annie's daughter, glances back at a man who looks like a bodyguard. He even has like an earpiece. So you get the idea that these guests are very wealthy. Charlie pays her respects at the casket to her grandmother, and we see an interesting necklace with a charm on the that's on the corpse. And you notice that both Charlie and her mother and her grandmother all have the same necklace, and it's this little symbol, which I'm assuming you're going to tell us more about at the end, because I practiced restraint and did not look this up myself.
Yes, I will tell you all about that symbol because it is important, and you do see it in a lot of places throughout the movie if you're paying attention. Yes.
But Charlie also notices a woman put something on, it's like an oil on her grandmother's lips. And in this scene, we also establish here that Charlie is severely allergic to peanuts.
Yes, and she eats a chocolate bar like a crazy person. Did you notice that?
It was aggressive.
Yes.
So back at home, they are greeted by their dog, Rexy. Annie works on her miniatures, one of which is of a hospice scene, which you mentioned earlier was a trauma.
Yes, that's one of Annie's traumas. And since we know that she just came from her mom's funeral, we can assume that that is her mom, Ellen. So, yeah.
We also see an ad for an art display of hers for a few months from now. So we know that she does this, building of miniatures somewhat professionally. The dad checks on Peter. He's in his room strumming guitar, but he seems fine and not in too much grief. The mother checks on Charlie, who has drawn her grandmother in a coffin and seems to be processing things a little more roughly. They have a really interesting conversation here where Annie tells her that she was her grandmother's favorite and always wanted to feed her. And Charlie counters this by saying that she knew that her grandmother always wanted her to be a boy and not a girl. She also wants to know who would take care of her if her mom dies. And then Annie doesn't really answer the question and tells Charlie that she never cried as a baby, even she was born, and wonders if crying would have felt like a relief. Mom goes to the studio to turn off the lights. She sees a box of her mother's things, including a photo album. This is the old, I don't know if your parents had these when you were growing up, but they have like sticky pages, and you would like lift up the little plastic covering and then stick the photos to the sticky part and then close the clear plastic again. You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
I remember these vividly.
I remember them very much. My grandma had a bunch of them in her house that we used to go through. And then my mom, she was actually super into scrapbooking when we were kids. So we would all scrapbook together. But it wasn't the sticky page one. It was like the ones where you go to Michael's and buy way too many stickers and make it all fun. But yeah, I am familiar. Yeah, with the old kind of sticky.
So we have the old photo albums and also a book, and it was titled Notes on Spiritualism, and inside it has a note from her mother, and the note is basically like, sorry I couldn't tell you anything, but don't worry, it's totally going to be worth it, and all the sacrifice that we made is going to pale next to the rewards. I don't know about you, but watching this, I couldn't tell if Annie knew what her mother was talking about, or if this had been like an ongoing conversation, or what.
No, I don't get the vibe that she knew what she was talking about there. I think like her mom has always been super distant from her, and I actually think if you look at this note, it's out of character based off of the way that Annie later describes her mom in the grief counseling, because it says like love mommy at the end and all that, but what we learned from Annie is that her mom was super distant, not loving, didn't show any affection. So the note's actually really kind of weird, and I think not anything Annie expected.
Yeah. So Annie, as she's looking at this, kind of gets emotional and just shoves everything back in the box and turns off the light. As she does, she glances back and she sees what looks like her mother's figure in the shadows. And when she turns the light back on, there's no one there. And she says, Mom, like calls out for her. And it is so creepy. If you look at it and your darkness settings are correct on your TV or whatever, it really looks like a picture where someone was standing just at the light and you can see a figure that's so still, but you can't make it out. Kind of like in the movie poster.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's super creepy, and I think the movie does a really good job for the majority of it to kind of give you these jump scares or little scares that are very human, like very normal, where if you're experiencing trauma or you're experiencing loss and grief, one of the way your mind works through it is to convince yourself that you're seeing something or you're seeing a loved one or something. So is she actually there? Is she not? It's just very real. It's very spooky. It's a good start to the eerie feel of the movie.
Yeah. I felt very creeped out watching it. And I don't consider myself very sensitive to this type of thing, but this movie did it for me.
Yes.
So she looks at one of her minis, and this one is what looks like a woman nursing a baby in bed while an older woman is standing over both of them, offering her own breast, which kind of puts the whole your grandmother always wanted to feed you thing into a chilling perspective. Annie hastily kind of turns the display around, and then she leaves the room and heads to bed.
I know. I wish I could be in Annie's head when she was looking at that and just like, I wonder what she was thinking. But like the idea of your mom just like wanting to feed your kid like with her own body, just creepy, super creepy. I think this is a good showing of like how much Ellen the mom like forced herself into Annie's life and her birth and feeding and everything of her children, and it just was very controlling of the whole situation.
Yeah. So in the next scene, we're in a classroom. Charlie is playing at school. She's supposed to be doing her quiz. She's not doing her quiz. And then a bird smashes into the window, and Charlie kind of eyes some scissors that are on the desk. I guess we should acknowledge the actor in this film and the character in the movie. They seem to have some sort of a medical condition, but it's not really talked about or really highlighted in the movie, I don't think. Like, it seems present, but not like a major factor.
Right. So, and I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end, but one thing we do note from this scene is that she is in a special needs education room. The way the teacher's talking to the students and some of the other stuff in the room shows us that. Also, if you read the original script, it does say that this room is a special needs classroom. Outside of that, it's really not acknowledged in the film that she has special needs, and it's not said what her special need is, and I'll talk about it a little bit more at the end, but I think all we need to know right now is that it is a special needs classroom. Yep.
Okay. Well, then it cuts to Peter's classroom, and he is staring at a girl who's about his age while the professor is lecturing about the flaw of Heracles, which she says is arrogance since he ignores all the signs during the play. Meanwhile, his friend texts him to ask if he wants to smoke some pot later. We cut back to Charlie. She is outside and she has found the dead bird, which is a pigeon, and she takes the scissors that she stole from the desk and she cuts off his head and then stuffs it into her pocket. And then here she notices an older woman watching her from across the roadway, which we have to assume is somebody who is also present at that funeral.
Yes, it is someone who is at the funeral. That is true.
So the next scene, Annie is looking up ghostly apparitions online, and she's painting like this really tiny webpage onto a laptop miniature, which I thought it was a neat looking scene. She enters what appears to be her mother's old room, and she sees a triangle just burnt into the floor. She appears a little disturbed, and she shuts the door. She then asks her husband if he's the one who opened the door, and he says it was not him. She watches as he locks it back for her, and then Peter walks in with a phone call from the cemetery and hands it to the dad, and here we learn that there's apparently been some sort of a desecration that's occurred, even though it's only been 1 week since the burial. And he does not give Annie this info, and Annie then says that she's leaving and gonna go watch a movie. We cut to the next scene, and Annie is definitely not at the movies. She's going to grief counseling. And in this counseling session, she mentions being forced to come to these in the past. She talks about her mom having a hard life, dissociative identity disorder, and dementia, which is a heck of a combo, speaking of layer cakes. And she talks about her father starving himself to death when she was a baby, and that was because of his extreme psychotic depression. And then she also talks about her older brother being schizophrenic, who died of suicide when he was 16, and he left a note that said that their mom was trying to put people inside of him, which I know group therapy is there for a reason, but this is a lot to drop on a group of strangers, isn't it?
It's quite a bit. It's quite a bit to drop on a group of strangers, but I think it's a really cool scene because I think it gives you your first hint at what could potentially be hereditary to this family, which is mental illness. So, and then it leaves you questioning, because this is the first time you kind of see Annie as a character outside of her grieving, and it's setting you up for the whole movie of, is Annie sane or is she not? So I like this scene, but it is a lot.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting, and I'm sure this happens in group therapy too, where you're sitting there, you're a little reluctant to talk about it. And because I think she kind of says she hates these things she was forced to go before, she doesn't want to deal with it. And then she just trauma dumps on everybody there. And I'm sure that happens at real sessions like this, but it was interesting to watch it go from like hesitation to, anyway, here's the worst things that have ever happened to me in 90 seconds.
Right. It was definitely a big trauma dump, that's for sure.
She also says that she and her mother were estranged for a while and that she wouldn't let her mother near any of them when she was pregnant with her son. But when she got pregnant with her daughter, she felt guilty, and she said she, quote unquote, gave her daughter to her. And then she talks about feeling blamed for things that she can't even articulate. And this scene made me wonder, like, was Annie aware that her mother wanted a boy child for her, whatever her mystical reasons were, and that's why she wouldn't let her near when she was pregnant with her son?
Maybe. So that's a good point. Like why they were distanced at that time. I guess I don't know for sure. But I will say that there is a lot that's happening in Annie's subconscious that she doesn't even realize. And it happens a lot throughout the movie, especially with the sleepwalking. So there probably was a part of her that did know. Yes, I bet there was. But not a part that she's aware of, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does. It's something you intuit and can't put words to it. And she just said, I'm feeling guilty and feeling blamed for things that I can't even explain. So
Exactly.
So we cut to the next scene, and Peter is in his room. He is smoking weed. He gets a text from his friend about a huge party the next day, and we see a POV from the treehouse where it looks like someone is kind of mimicking Peter's smoking by blowing into the cold, which I assumed was Charlie.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's a cult member. I think
Yeah, now that you've said that, now I'm second guessing it. But when I watched this, even the second time, I thought it was Charlie kind of like mimicking her big brother.
No, because I think when Charlie's out there, she has a space heater on. So I'm pretty sure it's just a cult member out in the cold, breathing.
Being all culty like one does.
Yes, yes.
So the next day we see Charlie in her room, and she's building some weird little statues from animal parts and trash. She has this tick that she does, and we introduce it here, and she clicks her mouth. If you've seen that movie, or at least if you're like me and you've seen that movie, that sound still gets under your skin in the most creepy and effective way. Sometimes when I'm in a dark room by myself, I will make that click just to give myself goosebumps. Have you ever done that?
Silly. No.
It's not silly. It's not silly, Charlie.
I love it. Well, I will say this movie gives me goosebumps, so I do get that part of it. But no, I have never made the clicking noise before, nor do I think I will.
Oh, you have to now.
Well, maybe
I'm gonna do it to you.
You could. I'm not trying to summon any demons into the house. So.
So she's making these clicking noises while she's working on this creation, and then she suddenly sees like a blue light flashing around in the room. We cut to Annie in the kitchen, where she gets an email from the gallery that she's showing at later, and they're basically just asking for a progress update and photos of her piece. Annie seems very annoyed by this. And then we cut back to Charlie, who is walking outside with her little bird head. She's following a muddy trail near the treehouse, and there are footprints in the mud. Back in Annie's studio, we see her setting up a miniature of her planned art display. So it's miniatures of her minis at a museum, which I thought was kind of cool.
It is cool. I actually think if you look into one of the scenes later, you can see that it's supposed to, like, that was the request of, or the purpose of part of the show is to do a miniature of the miniature. So it is pretty neat.
That's cool. Because I don't think I saw that when I watched this. So I thought it was like her private joke. Like, I'm going to do these miniatures, but I'm also going to do a miniature of the miniatures.
Of the gallery. No,
Yeah.
It was a publicized part of the show. I forget where they hide it, but they do hide it somewhere in the movie.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So Peter comes in the room to ask if he can borrow a car for a party. She asks pretty normal parent questions like, where are you going? What are you doing? But the entire exchange is very passive aggressive. They don't talk to each other. They don't answer each other's questions.
Yeah. I think the point of that is to give the background that they have fought. They fight. They know how to fight. This is the way they talk to each other. It's kind of tiptoey. It's kind of passive aggressive. There's definitely tension between these two.
Yeah. Does your sister want to go? I don't know. Does she want to go? Have you asked her? Where is she? Like, they're not direct with each other. They're not communicating well. It's very uncomfortable.
Yes. Not communicating well and silence is a huge part of this movie.
So we cut back to Charlie, who is staring at a figure in the distance who is surrounded by a ring of flames. And then Charlie makes her click noise again. And Annie finds her outside and scolds her for not having shoes and a coat. Charlie doesn't mention the weird man in the field burning stuff, and then they go back in the house, and Annie tells her that she is gonna go to the party with Peter even though she doesn't want to go.
So I don't have a definitive answer on this one. Who do you think was in the field? Who do you think that was?
Just a cult member, I assumed. Somebody from the
but
funeral.
Annie doesn't see them. Don't you think Annie would see someone lighting a fire in the field?
I thought she just wasn't paying attention.
Maybe. I mean, that could be it, because she is being very aggressive towards Charlie. Doesn't
Yes.
she call her like an idiot here or something awful?
I think she says something about her not wearing her coat. I thought.
And then that's when she calls her an idiot because she's not wearing her coat. Yes. And it's just, it's gross. Okay, so you think it's a cult member. I think it's the dead Ellen, but that's just...
Oh. Okay,
Yeah.
so she's seeing a vision of her grandmother.
Of her
I assume that
grandmother.
the blue light is her dead grandmother.
No.
It's not?
No, I'm not going to tell you now. I'll tell you at the end because it's
Oh,
so
God.
good. And it tells you so much.
I'm going to have to watch this movie 3 times.
You are.
Okay, we cut to Charlie and Peter driving to the party. They pass a telephone pole, and I definitely didn't see this the first time I watched it, but the symbol from the necklace charms is etched into it. And I gasped when I saw it on my second watch.
I had the exact same experience as you. I didn't see it the first time either. And the second time I was like, no way.
Yep.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yep. So at the house party, it's at an extremely rich person's house, apparently. And Peter sees the girl from earlier that he seems to like. There's a bunch of music blasting and people drinking and making food in the kitchen. And we cut back to Annie. She's working on a miniature of a bedroom. And there's a really unsettling woman in a nightgown standing in the doorway while the occupants of the bedroom are asleep in their bed. Which, when I saw this, I kind of just assumed, when Annie's mother had moved in with them, maybe this was just kind of some of the dementia, sleepwalking, that type of thing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I kind of saw it as absolutely it could be that. I also saw it as we learned that her mother basically forced her to have kids. Annie never wanted kids, but her mom was so adamant about it. So in my mind, it hit such an obsessive point that her mom would creep up to see if she was trying to have kids and watch her be intimate. Yes, which honestly seems outrageous, but this whole movie is outrageous.
There are some grandparents who are like, "When are you giving us a grandbaby?" But this is next level.
It's absolutely next level. Yeah.
So we cut back to Peter's party. He is flirting with the girl that he likes, and he offers her weed, and she's down for it. They go to another room to smoke. Charlie tries to follow them, but Peter doesn't want her to follow. He tells her, just go to the kitchen and get some food. They're making cake in there. It'll be fun. And then Peter and the girl walk into the room, and there's a couple of other guys. And she's basically like, look, he brought weed. And they start taking his weed. And from here, Peter's life only gets worse.
And I can't wait to come back to the scene, because if you think the symbol on the telephone pole was shocking, there is so much happening in this scene that you've missed. You will have to go watch it another time.
Oh my God.
Yes, I can't wait to tell you.
Okay. So Charlie, meanwhile, has started eating the cake. It seems like she might be eating something that has nuts in it. She tries to drink water, but it's pretty clear she's having a reaction. She finds Peter, and he sees that she's wheezing and she can't breathe. And to his credit, he just immediately scoops her up and carries her to the car and rushes to take her to a hospital. In this scene, we hear a lot more of that unsettling kind of rapping, scratching music. She's freaking out and trying to breathe, and then this most famous scene in the movie, she sticks her head out of the window to try to get more air, and in the middle of that, Peter swerves to avoid a deer, and then he smashes Charlie's head into a telephone pole, and then he just slams on brakes and stops, and it's completely silent. So this really chaotic scene was happening. Him are you okay? You're gonna be okay. We're getting help. Whatever. He's screaming. The car is screeching down the highway. Charlie is gasping very loudly. There's noise from the car moving and the wind and everything. And then swerve, slam, stop, silence. And he's clearly stunned. And that silence at the end is just very heavy.
We have to talk about this scene. We have to pause and talk about it, because first off, the acting done here, so good.
It is
good. I just the way, and there's a moment where he talks himself back up, and he's like, you're okay. you're okay. And then he like starts to drive again, and just him like going in the house in shock and laying down. It's just, I just love the acting in the scene. I love the way it's done. But what was your reaction the first time you saw this scene? Is this not the most shocking scene of any movie you've ever seen?
It is, and I have to tell you something, which I don't know if we've talked about this actually.
Maybe not.
I love, I love horror to the point where I will turn on horror movies and sleep to them sometimes. But I have this thing where if I see a trailer for a horror movie, or if I hear people talking about a horror movie and there's like a lot of buzz about it, I will stop watching the trailer. Like if I see it come past my feed or whatever, I'll stop watching it. I'll skip it. I'll whatever. I want to go into horror movies blind, which meant in this example, when this movie came out, I knew it looked good. There was a lot of buzz. I knew the actors are good. And I was like, I'm in. I didn't need any more information. So I did not expect this at all because I had not seen a complete trailer yet.
That's so I don't know why, but I just randomly put this on one night and knew absolutely nothing about it. So I went into this movie as blind as you did. And oh my God, the reaction when I saw this scene was, because you're for sure convinced at this point that Charlie is going to like play a big role.
Yes.
And then she just dies.
Yes.
In such a horrific way as well. And it's crazy.
But yeah, the way Peter is kind of like just in denial too. Like he can't process what just happened, and he does something that seems completely unrelatable, which is he just drives home and lays down in bed, and then we watch him lay there and wait for daylight. He's either waiting for his parents to wake up and fix everything, or he's waiting for this to be over because it was just a nightmare, and maybe that's his hope. So you kind of watch him hear his mother scream, and he's like, yep, okay, it wasn't a nightmare, this really happened. And we've talked about this before, you never know how you're going to react to something really traumatic until after the fact. But it's well done, it's very intense, and it just feels bad the whole time.
It does, it's very good. So one other thing about this scene, it seems like a completely unlikely, impossible death that would never actually happen. But in 2004, this almost exact same thing did happen. There were two boys that were out at a party drinking, and they drove home, and one of them was puking out the window, and the other one swerved to miss a car and hit a telephone pole and decapitated the boy. The boy that was driving the car then drove home, slept in his bloody clothes with his friend's headless body remaining in the car until the neighbor found it the next morning. And Ari Aster has been... Yes, they've questioned Ari Aster to ask if this is what inspired the death in the movie, but he has never confirmed it. But like, come on, it has to be.
It's too similar. Also, where was he in 2004, huh?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. No,
was he the neighbor?
He could have been the neighbor. He was not one of the boys. I forget what their names were, but neither of them were Ari Aster. But yeah, could have been the neighbor.
But yeah, so... like I said, we watch his face while he hears the screams, and then there's this awful cutaway shot of Charlie's head just covered in ants on the side of the road. And then we watch Annie grieve violently while Peter stands in the dark listening. There's kind of this montage of her grief, and she is incredible in this scene. The way she's throwing her body around, it looks like labor pains, and kind of thinking about like that really violent pain of labor and the violent pain of having your child and having their life end so suddenly. I just you see it, like yes. you can feel it in that moment.
I know. I could say it 100 times throughout this whole like episode, but it is really criminal that she was never even nominated for an Oscar.
I hate that.
I know. She's so good.
She's incredible. So we see the funeral, and you kind of hear the overlay of Annie's kind of continued wails. There's a shot of Peter looking through some stained glass and watching the funeral guests in his home while Annie stays in bed. And then later we see Peter in his bed at midnight, and we can see the treehouse through his window, and there's red light illuminating the cabin from within, or the treehouse from within. We cut to Steve, the dad, looking through his daughter's sketchbook in her room. He's sad, and I think this is the most emoting that we ever see from him. He's very stoic.
He is very stoic. Yeah, I'm trying to think. He doesn't show much love or emotion at any point throughout the movie.
Yeah. He does yell something funny when they're in the attic, but we'll talk about that when we get there.
I love that line.
In the next scene, Peter is in class. He's totally spaced out. We cut to him smoking weed with his friends under bleachers. He seems physically ill and also out of it. He's there, but he's not really there. And then it almost seems like he could be having an allergic reaction at some point.
Yeah, so if you pay attention to the scene, there is actually something going on here that causes that reaction, but I'll tell you about that later. However, did you notice that, to me, it looks like he's having a panic attack, and he says it feels like his throat's getting bigger?
Yeah.
That's the exact same thing Charlie says when she's having her allergic reaction. So
Ugh.
it's a throwback to her. And I just think it's just the way that this is scripted. It's very intentional.
So we cut to later that evening when he goes home. He bikes up to the house. His mother is asleep in the car in the driveway. And when he goes inside, Annie leaves because apparently she wasn't actually asleep. It seems like she's just avoiding him. When she goes to, so later she goes to grief counseling again, but this time she tries to bail out, except for this time a woman flags her down before she can leave, and she says she recognizes her from months ago and that her name is Joan. She asks about her mother, and Annie reveals that she's actually there now for her daughter. Joan says that her son also died along with her 7-year-old grandson. Joan gives Annie her number in case she needs someone to talk to, and Annie seems legitimately grateful for this but leaves.
So the first time you watched this movie, how did you feel about Joan when you saw her in the parking lot scene?
I couldn't tell if this was going to be part of her grandmother's weird friends or if it was just a genuine, like, somebody who cares about somebody going through something.
Yeah, that's so when I saw it the first time, when Joan enters the screen, it's like such a breath of fresh air because this movie is so emotionally withdrawn up until this point. Like, everyone is so stoic, they're so silent, they're so introverted, and then this wonderful, like, nice woman comes up and she's actually truly caring and showing like the littlest ounce of love. And I think that's what's so brilliant and disarming about her, is that even as an audience, like, you're feeling like love for the first time in the movie. And we learn later it's used for manipulation, but I think it's well done. It just
She's
shows
getting
how
love
deprived.
bombed.
Yeah, but it shows how deprived Annie's been of any care the majority of her life.
Yeah, and that's true because up until this point, the only emotion we see is Annie grieving.
Yeah, and some passive-aggressive anger. That's really it.
Annie goes home and she tells Steve that she's been at the movies and she goes to bed. She lies awake and so does Steve. She says she'll be back and he remarks that, well, no, it's obviously you're not going to be back because you're bringing your blanket. And it's clear that she's going to the treehouse, which is apparently the only place she can sleep. Which, as a person who has dealt with insomnia for many years, I get it. Like, there are nights where I will take anything to go to sleep. Treehouse, melatonin, a weird pillow, whatever it takes.
That's what the whole, like, what they say, if you can't fall asleep, you just need to change your setting, right? So, like, go out to the couch, sleep on the couch, go sleep in the guest room, just change your scene. So, and then of course the treehouse, that's Charlie's place, so she feels closer to her daughter there. So that's basically the same idea of going and sleeping in her bed.
Yeah.
So, which I'm sure would provide a little comfort in the grieving process. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it does. So we see Peter, he's lying awake and he's staring at the red glow coming from the treehouse, and then he's startled and he thinks that he can see her in the room. But it's just clothes on a chair.
Can we just say, like, how real that moment is? How many times have you woken up in the middle of the night and seen like like you accidentally threw a sweater over a chair that wasn't normally there, and you wake up and you convince yourself that somebody's in the room? Have you ever done that?
I have done that, and that fear or experience has been replaced by having little kids who come into your room at night and say the weirdest shit.
That's so true.
That, like, you'll be dead asleep and all of a sudden there's somebody right up at your ear going, "Mom."
I know, my daughter, she likes to bring in, it's actually sweet, so it's disarming, so I don't get scared by them, but she'll bring us stuffed animals to bed. She'll be like, I got you Clifford and you like the duck, and she'll pass them out. She wakes us up to give us our stuffed animals, and then we go back to sleep. It's cute though.
That is cute. That's cute, but also sometimes my teenager will come in and want to talk to me late, or he doesn't realize it's late or whatever. And he has a man voice now. So that's what I get to wake up to. Like,
that's so true.
Dead of night and, Mom, ah!
What are you doing here? Oh, that's funny.
So later we see mail being pushed through a door slot. And one of the mailers includes a pamphlet that's advertising one of those Talk Through the Veil conferences where grifters charge hundreds of dollars for vulnerable grieving people to tell the grifter what they'd like to hear the most and then have it echoed back to them. Annie is making a miniature that features writing on the wall of the bedroom with the word satiny. I think that's how you say it, Santony.
Yeah, I'll talk about this word a little bit more at the end. There's a couple different ways to say it.
Yeah, but it's written on the wall on the miniature that she's making. And then she spills paint on her work table, and as she's cleaning it up, she finds Joan's number from earlier.
Yeah, so would you believe me, and I won't tell you everything, but would you believe me if I told you that this entire movie was color coded?
Yes, I would, which is why I think I need to watch it like 5 more times.
Yeah, well, it is. And the color of the paint bottles is actually really important here.
Oh my God.
I'm so excited to tell you.
Okay. So Annie goes to meet Joan in her apartment. There's an interesting shot of her doormat, which looks like it might have some like runes or spells or wards sewn into it.
Yeah, it does. They're everywhere. There's it's mostly pentagrams and compasses, but
Okay.
yes, they're there.
So then Annie, she notices it and she remarks on it because her mother used to make the same kind. And then as Annie talks with Joan about the trauma of finding her daughter's body, Joan gives her some tea, which Annie removes parts of the tea leaves or something from her mouth. Like it's like loose leaf tea, and she like pulls some of it out.
Yeah. I'll tell you what that is later too.
Okay. Joan asks about her son, and Annie says that once when she was sleepwalking, she found both of her kids covered in paint thinner, and so was she. Which, oh my God, I know we've talked about night terrors, but I can't. Waking up and finding out that you may have just accidentally been about to harm your kids, I can't. Ugh.
Well, not only like when you're now you're the one who's experienced night terrors and sleepwalking. I never have, but like not only is she about to harm her kids, but she has lit the match. Like they are all covered in paint thinner and the match is lit. That's insane.
Yeah.
I can't even to be that close to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like just the idea alone of like, okay, I brought paint thinner and this was my intention, but to have the paint thinner and the match, terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Terrifying.
Seconds from tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she says she was standing there with the matches and the empty bottle of paint thinner, and she just started screaming, and then it woke everyone up and she put the match out. But no one believed it was just sleepwalking, or she feels that no one believed it. She says that Peter's always held it against her and that her relationship with Peter can't ever recover from it.
Well, I don't know. If you notice the way she talks here too, she's being very like, she's making a lot of excuses, and like it almost feels like she's lying, or she knows that there is something more to it that she's not admitting to herself even, which goes back to that subconscious thing where her subconscious knows a lot, but Annie and herself does not.
Which I think I've known people who had really, really oppressive parents, and they end up being like, they can't help but lie. They lie all the time about things. They lie to themselves, they lie to other people, and it's a, I don't know if it's a trauma response. I'm not a psychologist or whatever, but I've seen that before, and that kind of makes sense narratively too.
It does, because yeah, there's definitely a theme of abuse throughout this entire thing. So yeah, it does make sense.
So Peter comes home and Steve asks him about his SATs. He says he'll do it later. Steve checks on Annie, who is making Charlie's death scene, and he does not like this, which I don't blame him. He is worried that Peter will be devastated by this because he feels like it seems like he feels like Annie is just using it to jab at Peter.
I think you're right there. I didn't even pick that up, but I think you're correct.
Yeah. She says that it's a neutral view of the accident, which I feel like if you're using language like that, then yeah, that's exactly what you were doing. You were trying to use it to hurt your kid, your living kid.
Well, but we do learn that she uses her dioramas to review her trauma, though. And this is obviously a trauma.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think in my mind, Peter never even went in that room, because every time we see him walk by, he's like really uneasy. But yeah.
Yeah, but is he uneasy because she's in there and she's horrible to him?
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know. So he tells her that dinner's ready, and then he kind of storms out. At dinner, this is the infamous, should be Oscar-worthy scene. At dinner downstairs, the tension is, let's call it machete thick. Yes. And Peter compliments Steve's cooking. Annie literally snarls at him. She isn't eating, and Peter makes the horrible mistake of asking if she's okay. She does her passive-aggressive asking questions back, and then they have it out. He swears, and then she gives this really famous monologue, and it's hard to watch. It's really intense. Her grief about not accepting or forgiving and the fact that no one ever admits what they've done, she's just kind of screaming about that, and it all comes out in this just intense, scream-filled, terrifying monologue. And then she sits down and Peter asks, well, what about what you've done? And how Charlie didn't want to go to the party. And then Steve is just like, okay, we're done with this conversation. And then Annie leaves.
It's such a brilliant scene of acting. And the other thing too, because Toni Collette does so good here, you don't even like realize it, but like as Peter is sitting there screaming, "Release me," like it's just, there's so much symbolism there too of what's about to happen. And it's such a good scene. And the whole monologue is so well scripted and it's so real. I don't know. This movie's so good.
Yeah. Later, we watch Annie working on a preschool mini, and then she goes to an art store where she runs into Joan, who is very excited to see her. Joan says that something wonderful happened to her, and she talks about a medium, and it's the same one from that mailer that we saw being pushed through the door earlier. She says she was skeptical, but that her mind has been changed, and now she has like a whole sales pitch. And she says, no, but for real, there were scientists there and everything, and now they're total believers. Like, okay. Says everyone who ever falls into this stuff ever. She says the medium came home with her and that they conjured her grandson, and Joan invites her over so she can prove it.
Yes. So real quick, did you notice what was in Joan's trunk in this scene?
No, I didn't, but she had it open because she was putting supplies in there, right?
Yep.
I did not.
It's a chalkboard. It's a chalkboard.
Okay.
It's not her. And what does she use in the seance?
The chalkboard.
And it's not her grandson's. She just freaking bought it. Isn't that nuts? And the way the scene
oh,
makes you, yeah, it's not her grandson's chalkboard that she.
Oh, she just lied.
Seance.
Oh, and she was rubbing it in her face.
Well, that, and she, if you notice, Joan is very touchy and she grabs Annie a lot. She does that to control her and to move her. So Annie only sees what she wants her to see. So when you're paying attention to the scene, she moves her away from the contents of her trunk so that Annie can't see it.
Oh my God.
Good? It's so good.
This is going to become, I'm going to have to revise this and make it my best third watch because I need to go back and watch literally every scene.
All of it. There is also a 4-hour YouTube video I'm going to tell you about that you can watch instead.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so back at Joan's, they do a small seance so that Joan can summon her grandson, Louis. Annie seems terrified. They have this glass cup that they're touching, and then I'm asking Louis to move it, and then Annie is startled. She actually looks under the table, which, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So, and I do think it's intentional here. So I think probably most horror listeners are familiar with the rise of spiritualism and these sisters called the Fox Sisters. They would fake people out. They would bring them to their home, conduct seances, and it was later found out that they did all this stuff by like, they made the noises by like clicking their bones and doing random tricks, and none of it was real. This scene is brilliant because there is magic happening. It is real, but it's not what it really is. So there is still a trick happening, but like I said, like the chalkboard is not her grandson's. I don't think she had a grandson and a son that died. I think the person doing everything here is a demon. And so there is a trick, but it's not the trick that you think it is.
Which is interesting because Annie's like, okay, I'm going to find the reality-based explanation for this. And not only is there not one, she's right to be suspicious, but it's not a ghost. It's some other dark force, which, in the middle of this, something touches Annie's hair and she freaks out. Joan brings out the chalkboard and then something writes, "I love you, Grandma." And Joan is, ecstatic, very happy, and Annie is very upset. They stop and then Annie tries to leave fast. Joan gives her instructions on how to summon Charlie when she's ready, including a ritual to read in a language she says she doesn't know, which I hope they spelled it out phonetically, I guess.
Yeah. It is interesting how she was able to read it. It's Hebrew. And yeah, it's a totally different alphabet. I don't know how she figured that out, but she did.
She says that every member must be in the house for it to work. So every member of the household has to be there for it to work. And she also said that it wasn't her fault that Charlie died and that she isn't even actually dead, which that's a lot to process.
It's a lot to unpack too, because it's interesting. At no point does Annie say that she thinks she killed Charlie. She thinks that Peter did it. The fact that Joan even says that is weird because she's never let on to that. And then we find out with the follow-on that she isn't even actually dead. Joan's basically saying, you did kill her, but she's still here, which is like, it's messed up when you think about it.
It's very messed up. We watch Annie driving back, and then this was the one I think that got me the most, this instance of it in the movie. We hear Charlie's click very loud in the back seat, which terrifies Annie, who then begins to sob. And I think this one was the scariest one for me too.
I think the one that gets me is the one in the bedroom when Peter looks over at the chair.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this one's definitely startling too. It's kind of like the car jump scare scene in A Haunting of Hill House too. Maybe it's just the car for you.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Later, we see Annie lying awake in bed next to Steve. She finds ants on her blanket and then follows their trail to the wall and then into Peter's room. He's covered in ants and he looks dead, which seems to be a callback to the scene with Charlie's decapitated head from earlier. And then suddenly her son is sitting up and there are no ants. He says that Annie is sleepwalking and she asks if Charlie is there. And he asks, "Why are you afraid of me?" She says she never wanted to be his mother. Like, it just blurts out. And then she covers her mouth like she didn't mean to say it. She says she's afraid to be a mother and that her mother pressured her to become one. And she even says that she tried to miscarry and it didn't work. He starts to sob. She tries to say that she loves him. And then they're both sobbing. And suddenly they're both covered in a liquid. And then a flame appears and ignites everything. And then Annie wakes up for real this time.
Yeah, that scene is such a lore drop. Because we have, up until this point, like, a general idea that Ellen pressured her into having kids, but we didn't realize the intensity of it. And the other thing here, you know how I've said that Annie's subconscious is telling her something? She clearly, whatever it is telling her, it is around Peter, because she has been trying to kill Peter her whole life. Like, even before he was born. She tried to miscarry him. She tried to light him on fire with lighter fluid. Something in her brain is telling her that to save him, he needs to die. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, it's really intense. And that whole, I don't know, that struggle she's having where she says, "I never wanted to be your mother and also I love you." And just that, like, that conflict sometimes I feel like mothers have, especially if they were pressured to have the kid, that stress and that pressure, it comes from society, it comes from within you, it comes from your family. It's very, unfortunately, probably relatable to a lot of people.
I think so. I think it's a theme of the movie, how much women sacrifice themselves for their kids and how difficult that is. So yeah, for sure.
So now that she's awake for real this time, she goes to Peter's room, wakes him up, apologizes, and tries to make amends. She says she's figured everything out. And then she wakes up Steve and brings everyone downstairs to repeat the seance that she learned from Joan. Steve is skeptical and very annoyed. Peter is the first to feel the air flex. So there's like a change in the air. And then the cup moves. Steve is immediately over it. Annie tries to show them the notebook that she says Charlie wrote in. And then Peter starts to have a panic attack. And then a glass dish breaks on the other side of the room. Annie says, "Charlie, what's wrong?" And then the lit candle that's on the table ignites, kind of like a Charlie Kirk funeral decoration.
Oh my goodness.
And then everyone goes still, especially Annie, who looks like she swallows something. And then she goes even more still. And it's really creepy. Like, I'm actually getting goosebumps right now talking about it again.
Yes.
This time Steve looks under the table for a Fox sister clue, and then Annie growls and then stops and then comes to, sort of, but is speaking in like a child's voice, asking for her mom. And then everybody just starts yelling, which I feel is valid.
I would yell. Do you remember the time we tried to do a Ouija board in Boston?
My daughter still reminds me of the time we tried to do a Ouija board in Boston.
And I did, the second we got like 2 real words out of it, I was like, stop this right now. Nothing to do with this. So if I watch someone become possessed in front of me, I certainly would be yelling.
Yes.
A doubt.
Steve, I think, is with you on that point, and he grabs some water and tosses it on Annie, who now snaps out of it. You can also hear their dog barking from somewhere. And the scene cuts to a close-up of the minis, and this includes the house and the death scene of Charlie, and then a close-up of writing on the bedroom wall, which looks like the words lift touch or lift touch pandemon. It's nonsense. They're not really words.
No, they are.
Well, they don't look like words. Peter is sitting up in his bed, and then it cuts to him in class while a teacher is lecturing about the Great Depression. Peter sees the blue light that we've seen a couple times in the movie now, and it tracks around the room. And then he sees his own reflection, and it has this like shitty little smug smirk on it. And in the monologue, Annie had been screaming, "Don't look at me with that face on your face." And this is, I think, the face he's kind of been wearing, and he sees it on himself for the first time.
For the first time. Yes, that is the face that Annie was seeing, but it's not Peter that was making it.
He doesn't seem to think it's his face either, because he's startled by this, and when he sees that face on his face, he hears the tongue click, and then he jumps up and leaves and goes to the bathroom.
Yep.
Steve calls Annie saying that Peter is in hysterics, and she asks if he's talking about Charlie, which pisses him off. She gets defensive about her sleepwalking and hangs up, and then she goes back to her work. The phone rings again, and she lets it go to voicemail, and this time it's the gallery. She listens to the message, which is just, condolences about her loss, and then a status check. And so she starts smashing all of her work. Later, Peter and Steve come home and they notice a foul smell, and then they find Annie, who smashed all her work because she was, quote, tired of looking at them.
Let me pause you here.
Mhm.
So when you heard him say the foul smell, what did you think he meant? Paint thinner?
I didn't know if it was paint thinner, and I'm trying to remember how I reacted the first time I saw this movie. I think the first time I saw it, I was just like, okay, it's just the smell of evil that's permeating the house because something weird is happening.
That's fair. Well,
but the second
you know
time yes.
Okay.
It's in the attic, right?
It's in the attic. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
No, on the second watch, I definitely knew. Interestingly enough, Annie did not smash the miniature of her mother trying to pull her boob out for her baby, for Annie's baby. And then the mini of her son's room now includes a mini of him, but he's now missing his head, which is very creepy.
Yeah, which is more of that subconscious telling her that she needs to kill Peter.
Yeah, or a premonition of things she's worried about.
What's to come? Yeah.
Yeah.
That could be it too.
So later, Steve takes some meds and he gets ready to go sleep on the couch, and Annie hears scribbling noises coming from Charlie's room, and she sees the notebook sketching in itself. We cut to Peter's room where he is awoken by Charlie's tongue click, and then he can see her in the corner of his room, and it's really scary. The second you kind of process what you're looking at, her head rolls forward and goes like clump clump along the floor, but then it turns into a kickball, and then the family dog is there freaking out. Suddenly Peter's getting grabbed by hands trying to rip off his head, and then we hear a door or something slam. The dog whispers. We see Steve still asleep on the couch, while Annie is screaming for Peter, Peter thinks she was trying to hurt him. He says that he saw Charlie, and now Annie wants details, and she says she can still fix everything, but she needs him to be quiet about what he thinks he saw. Then we see Charlie's sketchbook on her bed with pictures of Peter sobbing with his eyes scratched out.
Do you think it was Annie that grabbed Peter's head in that scene?
The first time I watched this, I did.
I still think it was Annie who did it.
Do you?
I do.
Okay.
I think it goes back to that subconscious idea that she has that Peter needs to die. Also, some other things I'll tell you about too.
Okay. Annie, the intensity is ratcheting up. Now Annie tries to burn the sketchbook, but as she does, she catches fire instead. So she pulls it out of the fireplace, and somehow none of this wakes up her husband, which I assume is because he took the medicine.
That's true.
There's a really cool effect in the next scene. It cuts to outdoors, and it goes from night to day. It's like an on-off switch. It's an on-off switch, but for the outside, like for outdoors.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool effects like that in this movie. And I don't know if you noticed, but the passing of time in general in this movie is really weird. And there's sometimes that you think it's just been hours, but it's actually been like days or weeks since something's happened. So it's showing that. But also, remember the whole dollhouse image? This is to give you that feel that they're just in a dollhouse in someone's room. And that person is just clicking the lights on and off, and they have no control.
And somebody's
over
manipulating
anything.
them.
Yes.
Ugh.
I think it's really cool.
It is really cool. So Peter wakes up and leaves. He pauses by his mom's studio, which is cracked open, and he's super uncomfortable. And then we see her in the dark watching him, and it's very creepy. Later, Annie goes to Joan's apartment. She doesn't answer, but we can see inside the apartment now, and there's a bizarre spell ritual thing happening on the table, and it has pictures of Peter and the art that Charlie had been making with the creatures, and then a bunch of symbols that we've been seeing throughout the movie. There are little statue creatures made from bottles and pill containers. They've been fashioned into humanoid figures with silverware and cigarettes and stuff for their limbs, and they're bowing to a larger figure of a vitamin bottle with a decapitated bird head and a crown, and there are also dead animal heads all around it, and they seem to be worshipping the crowned bird head. And then Annie can't get in the apartment, but she kind of looks down at the welcome mat, and she seems to remember something.
Yeah, it finally clicks to her that the welcome mat is legitimately familiar.
Yeah. We cut back to Peter. He is in the schoolyard and he can see Joan across the road and she's like screaming rituals at him. And then she banishes him and he seems to respond to this. We cut back to Annie, who's frantically searching her mother's boxes, and she finds a book with the symbol on it, the symbol we've been seeing. She reads highlighted passages about a creature called Paimon, the god of mischief, who will possess the most vulnerable host if successfully invoked, and the possession needs to be of a male body, and that whoever invoked him will get super rich. Annie flips through the photo album from earlier, and she sees pictures of all of her mom's fucked up friends, and now they're worshiping pictures of her and her family, and this is when she realizes that one of them is Joan.
Yes, this seems crazy. There's so much happening, and the picture of her getting like the money dropped on her, it's just so it's so good. It's crazy.
They all look like they're on shrooms too.
Oh, without a doubt.
It's something. We see Peter in his school. He's walking through the halls. He's really distraught, and then the blue light appears, and it takes the shape of a square beam that is framing the halls, and then it hones in on a door. And just barely through this door, you can see a man who's beckoning him to come closer. Meanwhile, Steve is writing an email to a psychiatrist about Annie kind of losing touch with reality, and he gets an alert for a new email from the cemetery, which includes pics of the desecration that they had mentioned earlier. And this is where we learn that Annie's mother's grave was completely dug up.
Don't you think, like, the first call you would have mentioned, not just that the grave was desecrated, but, like, and the body's gone?
Yeah.
Why does it take this long for them to tell them that? Crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they were looking for her in the pile of mud.
Could be.
There's what they were doing was stalling until they could get a hold of their lawyers. That's what they were doing.
That's probably it.
So we cut to Annie, and she opens the attic, and she finds a bunch of flies and a horrible smell. And then she goes in and sees a decapitated body of what looks like her mother in the corner, lying on a bed of white powder. The symbol is there again. It's written on the wall. And then this scene is intertwined with a scene from Peter's class, where his teacher is lecturing about Greek mythology. Peter keeps hearing the clicks, and then all of a sudden his hand goes stiff and straight up in the air, and half of his face looks frozen, and then he violently slams his head on the desk a few times and then starts screaming.
Okay, let's talk about this.
Okay, let's do it.
It's crazy. First off, the acting is incredible. Second off, there's a lot, and I think this is one of the like more viral parts of this movie that's around the internet, and a lot of people get it wrong. So I just want to talk about the actor here. So when the scene was presented to him, he told Ari Aster that he had no problem bashing his head against a desk, to which Ari Aster was like, that's probably illegal. Let's at least pad it. So they did pad the desk before he smashed his face against it, but the actor does go all out. His face in this scene is actually his face. The only changes they did to it was they glued his eyes open, but he has an injury to his jaw that makes it easy for him to dislocate his jaw, so he dislocated his own jaw in this scene just for the filming.
That's so metal.
It's so metal. One of the misconceptions is that he dislocated his jaw after he smacked his head on the desk, which isn't true. The actor just could do it. But he does smack his head on the desk, and he says it's less padded than he thought it originally was. And he doesn't break his nose, but when he falls backwards off the chair, he does make his knee actually bleed the way he falls off the chair. So he absolutely beat himself up in the scene. Also, when they did the hand thing, the first time they did it, they tried to tie his hand down, but they realized it looked creepier if they just let him naturally bend it as far as he could. So it's just crazy.
It looks like, at first, I'm sure if you were in the classroom, you think he's raising his hand, but it's kind of, his hand is kind of cocked the wrong way, and the way his face, the face is on his face, it's intense. It looks nonsensical, but it's terrifying.
It's definitely terrifying. And he just does a really good job with it. All that coloring on his face, all that's just him, holding his breath and straining. It's not that much makeup. It's really
very talented.
Yes.
We cut to Annie. She has taken that album to the treehouse, and then the school is calling Steve to tell him about Peter. Steve drives Peter home. Annie comes running up to the car with a photo album. She is freaking out about Peter. They carry him inside and they tuck him into bed, and then Annie insists that Steve needs to look at what she saw in the attic, and she says there's he gets up there and she says there's more, and then he goes, more than your mother's headless body in the attic? Of course there is, which I laughed out loud.
I laughed so hard at that. I forgot that line was even in there, and I was like, that's perfect. This man is just done with it.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Throw it on the pile.
Yeah.
He sees what she saw, and then he actually accuses her of digging up her mother's corpse. Annie sets up the fireplace to burn the sketchbook, and she tries to explain everything to Steve and uses the album, kind of showing, here's what I saw, here's what's going on. And the more she talks, the more kind of manic and insane she sounds. She insists that he needs to burn the sketchbook because she isn't strong enough to do it, but they have to do it to save Peter. So she hands him the lighter fluid and begs him to toss it in the fire. He refuses and says he can't indulge in her obvious mental illness anymore. And then she grabs the sketchbook and throws it in the fire, and then Steve just ignites.
So this is such a cool moment, because this is, up until this point, this movie does not show its full hand. Right before she throws that in the fire, this could all be her mental illness, or this could actually be supernatural. And I think they've led us as an audience to believe that it is supernatural and evil at this point, and not that she's crazy. But it doesn't show its full hand until that book meets the fire. And
Yeah.
then it goes nuts.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. So she freaks out, but then she does the same, like, swallowing motion from earlier, that possession kind of motion. And then the outside, lights, like the daylight from outside turns off. In the next scene, we see Peter wake up. He sees the red light in the treehouse, and we can see his mom in the corner of his ceiling. And this is so creepy. It's one of the creepiest parts of the entire movie.
It's so scary.
She's crawling on the ceiling, and she creeps out of the room, and it's completely soundless, like she's floating on air. Worst Spider-Man ever.
Yeah.
Cursed Spider-Man. So then Peter finds his dad's body and freaks out, but he can sense something behind him. And then we see Annie hovering along in the ceiling in the frame. He senses her and he looks around the room, and then we see a naked figure. It's a dude. It's not Annie or anyone that we know. But then out of nothing, Annie appears and she chases Peter.
Yeah, this is nuts. This whole scene. Can you, we've all had it, right? That feeling where you're standing there and you just sense that someone is behind you watching you.
Mm-hmm.
Could you just imagine the scariest thing you could turn around to? And that's pretty much what this movie is.
It is. And I have this thing where if a movie is really scaring me and I can't believe it, I actually laugh, and it's not like a real laugh. It's like a ha, like I can't believe it. And I was right. I was doing that for the entire scene. It went on for a while because I don't know what to do with it. It's so intense.
That's what I had to rewatch the end of this movie because the first time I watched it, I was hidden behind a pillow the whole time.
Yeah.
It's so intense. It's nuts.
So Annie actually chases Peter to the attic where he kind of bolts the attic door shut, and then it's really sad. He's screaming, for his mommy to leave him alone. And this scene is very scary. It's very intense, but the abuse implications, whether that's psychological or physical, I couldn't get over that either.
Right. There's actually a couple times in the movie where Peter seems to regress to kind of a small child version of himself, which I believe is something common for abuse victims to do. And he does it here, but also right before he gets yelled at the table when they're eating, he's holding his cutlery all backwards and weird, like a small child would be. And when you're watching the movie, if you watch for that stuff, he does it a couple times. When he's really scared and he says mommy, and it's just really sad. And
it is sad.
It is. Yeah. That whole abuse theme is very present in this movie.
Yeah. So as he's screaming for her to leave him alone, it kind of pans down through the floor, and you can see Annie, who is pinned to the ceiling, and then she is just smashing her head into the attic door in an inhuman way.
It is nuts. This scene will forever be so ingrained in my mind. I have never seen something that has given me such full body chills as this moment. It is, everything in my blood just ran cold the first time I saw it. I still can't really watch it. It's so nuts. It's so good.
And the way it stops is really terrifying too, because it's sudden. It's a sudden stop. There's this, it's kind of like the scene where Charlie is killed, because there's all this intense screaming and this noise, and then it just stops. And that in and of itself is kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
When she stops, Peter looks around the attic, and we see 3 naked figures behind him, and he can't see them, but we see them. He does see the candles and the outline of a body in the white powder, and then he also sees his photograph in the center of it, and his eyes are scratched out in the photo. He turns around and starts slapping himself to try to wake up out of the dream or nightmare that he assumes he is having. And then he hears this horrible flesh tearing sound, and his mother is suspended above him and has like a tree saw.
Okay. So what it actually is, and this is brilliant too, it's a piano wire, which somehow makes it worse. But when Peter comes downstairs right before he sees his dad's body, you hear like this loud crash and clang, and it's the sound of the piano being pushed over. And when he turns a corner to walk towards his dad's body, in the right hand corner of the screen is a piano that's on the ground and open. So she grabs that piano wire while he's coming downstairs. It's just crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Ugh, that's terrible.
Yep, it's awful.
With the not tree saw but actual piano wire, she's attacking her own neck rhythmically, like it's like she's doing it to a beat. Yeah. And then it speeds up when he watches her, and then he watches her cut off her own head. And then suddenly some of the naked people appear, and they are smiling gleefully from the dark corner of the attic. And then he does probably the most rational thing anybody could in that moment, which is hurl himself from the nearest window.
Yeah, honestly, what else can you do? That's what I would do.
Yeah. He wakes up face down in the dirt, and there's a shadow of something that moves over him.
Well, did you see more than the shadow? Did you see the blue light go on his back there?
I saw the blue light throughout the movie, and at this point I just assume it's everywhere. So I don't remember it from this in particular, but it doesn't surprise me that it's there.
Very specifically, when he's laying on the ground, it goes right in the center of his back, and it's like it's just very there. But yeah, go ahead.
So he heads to the treehouse, and we briefly see the still body of what looks like their dog, and then we see what looks like Annie's headless body just floating up into the treehouse, and Peter follows it. There are more gleeful naked people watching him from the woods, and there's like this music that plays it's almost cute and like happy.
Yeah, this whole last sequence is like straight out of a fever dream. It's crazy.
It is. Inside the treehouse, there are people bowing to a statue that looks like one of Charlie's creations, but huge. The head here is a real person's head instead of a bird. The headless bodies of his mother and grandmother are bowed in front of it, and then a dozen or so naked or mostly naked adults are also bowed down. There's a framed picture of his grandmother, but she's labeled the Queen, and Joan approaches Peter and puts a crown on him. She calls him Charlie and says they fixed the mistake of giving him the wrong and unhealthy and female body. And then she tells him that he is a king of hell, and they pledge to honor him forever. Hail Paimon. End of incredible and incredibly messed up movie.
It's so good. Oh man. Okay. So there is so much I want to say. And first, let me just say that this movie is brilliant. I think it's perfect in every way. Not just in a horror movie way, but just like all around perfect. I adore everything about it. I know that might sound weird because this movie, it's brutal, it's terrifying, but the thing I like most about horror movies, and I actually mentioned this earlier, horror is just such a unique genre because directors can use or often use symbolism in horror to plant clues or to give a meaning throughout a movie that you don't initially see. So most horror movies, if watched correctly, you're getting two stories. You get the terrifying, bloody, straightforward story that's happening on the screen, but then there's almost always like a second, deeper meaning to the story. And this movie just does it so brilliantly. And let's start with the title. It's called Hereditary. And so we know that there's a disease in this movie that is hereditary. So what could this disease be? And there's actually three answers to it, and we talked about it very briefly. Now, the first one is the literal one, which is that it's a curse or a gift, depending on how you look at it, that the family bloodline has inherited that somehow carries Paimon. And I'd like to make a note here that there was an interview with the director, Ari Aster, and he states that the events happening in the movie actually happened. So it's not like some trick where, the entire movie turned out to be a dream or Annie's mental illness made this all up. No, the cult is real. Paimon's real. It's actually happening.
I appreciate that clarity because a lot of directors or writers, they'll be cute with it. Like, it's open to interpretation or whatever.
Yeah.
But I like that he was that explicit. And I didn't feel like this was a dream. There were parts where, especially when you watch it the first time, you could go back and forth, but it definitely seemed real.
By the end, it feels real. I think what's brilliant about this movie is that up until the dad catches fire, you're not sure. It could be going either way, but once he catches fire, there's really no doubt. But yes, I do like that he just straight up says it. Oh, and one other thing I didn't note. So there's a couple places I get a lot of this information. The first is there's this 4-hour deep dive YouTube video, and I'm doing my best to not just recite this YouTube video because it is so good. I'll link it in the show notes. It's called Hereditary: The Complete Guide, Everything Explained by Novum. If you want more, or like if this doesn't scratch the itch for you, go watch that YouTube video. It's so good. And he backs everything he's saying with facts. He's read the script. He's reached out to producers. He's read the Ask Me Anything with Ari Aster. He's got all of it. He's read the grimoires. Go watch the YouTube video. It's so good. But okay.
Wait, hold up. Who's grimoires?
Oh, I'll tell you.
Ah!
A few. They're coming. They're coming. Buckle in. So the curse. The curse is the obvious one, the number one. The number two I mentioned is the mental illness conditions that the family's carrying. And whether those mental illness conditions are due to whatever weird curse this bloodline has, or just due to the fact that this family is generally, that's just something they carry, that is something else hereditary to this movie. And then the third is the idea of abuse, which causes generational trauma. So in a way, abuse can be seen as hereditary. So clearly Ellen was abusive to Annie and pushed her ideologies and standards on her and forced her to become something she didn't want to be, and resulted in her distancing herself from her mother, which then results in the way she treats her own children. So there's three prevalent ways that hereditary is shown in this film, and those are the three. So everything in the movie is somehow symbolic or a reference to those three ideas. The first is the obituary, which we already talked about, and then the second is the dioramas in Annie's workshop. So those dollhouses are really strategically placed, like I mentioned, to give up a setup of the film and some context behind it. Oh, and one thing, before they show the diorama, they show the treehouse. It starts with a shot of the treehouse, which is a representation of hell, or pandemonium, which is the capital city of hell. That is what the treehouse is supposed to be. That is where Charlie feels more comfortable. That is hell. We then step away from hell to see the traumas that Andy has experienced. The first one, which is glanced over the most, is a diorama, and these are placed in chronological order of how they happen in her life. The first one is a view of the outside of just a single room with a locked door, old-timey wallpaper on it, and there's a sign on the door that says "Keep Out." So what we know from this is, or what we learn later, is Annie's dad locked himself in a room due to depression and slowly starved himself and died. And then in that same room, her brother took his life at the age of 16. That is this room. So
that's the trauma.
That's the first trauma she has, is that room. So that is her first childhood trauma. The second diorama is what looks like a preschool type room. Now it is, if you look really deeply at that and then you look at Charlie's classroom, they are not the same. This is more of a preschool, so like a younger child's room. And this isn't explicitly stated, but we can assume that this was Charlie's preschool, and this is where Annie was delivered the news that Charlie had a disability and would need to be placed in those special needs classes. This was obviously hard for her, so that is her second trauma, is Charlie's schoolroom. And then the next one is way more obvious. It is the hospice room that Ellen was in, and it's pretty self-explanatory. We find out that her mother had just died of an extended illness. We learn that it's most likely dementia that killed her. And then finally, the last one is their current home. So those three on the left side of the room are her past, her traumas, and then it jumps to the now. And there's a strategic gap placed in between her three traumas and their current house, and it's kind of like a gap shot of the workshop. And specifically, you can see in the corner, there's like a blueprint and things on all up on the wall, and just a gap of space. And this space represents the spiritual realm, or the in-between that's happening. And what proves that I'm not just making that up is a couple things. One, there's color coding that gives it away that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But also, this is the exact corner where Annie's mother appears to her after her death.
Oh, where she's standing.
Okay,
when she turns the light off.
In the workshop, when she turns the light off, yes.
Ugh.
So it's so strategic. And this is just the opening scene of the movie. And I promise I won't do every scene like this.
You literally could. We could do this We could do an episode on every scene, I feel.
Well, that's what the 4-hour YouTube is. So if you want that,
there you go.
Hop over there because it's so good. It is so good. The other thing that's important, so the dollhouses give us a lot of history. They give us a lot of context. They give us some symbolism. But the other thing that's important is that Annie is using these dollhouses to give herself a sense of feeling like she can control her trauma. This is her way to cope. This is her way to control. And she believes she has this control until she finally does break. And it's when she destroys it all towards the end of the movie after she gets that nice phone call from the people, because she's just given this kindness and she just finally breaks down and she's like, I don't want to look at anything anymore. And she destroys everything except the Charlie scene and Peter in his bed. So that it's just, that's another thing that these dollhouses symbolize. And then I mentioned this a little bit earlier. The dollhouses set up this like brilliant motif we see throughout the film, which is that this family has no control of their destiny. What is going to happen to them no matter what. And some larger being is viewing this family through a dollhouse-like lens and controlling them. So they are just puppets in a game. They have no control over their fate. It is already decided. And I think it could be assumed that the being that is doing this is most likely Paimon. And there's a lot that goes into that too.
So was Paimon the one that was watching Peter from the treehouse, you think, or was that just a cult member?
I think that was just a cult member.
Okay.
I think where you see Paimon most in the film is that blue light, which I'm about to talk about. But okay, to understand the blue light and some other stuff that I'm going to say, we have to very quickly just go over the color coding that I mentioned is in this movie. Everything yellow or gold is Ellen, so Annie's mom is yellow or gold. Anything red in the movie is the cult, which is really cool because it's one of the giveaways of like who in the background is a cult member and who isn't. So for example, when we first see Joan and she runs up to Annie's car when she's trying to leave, she's wearing a blue dress for Paimon and a red sweater, and she's driving a red car. And this is a dead giveaway that she's a cult member. There's a bunch of other examples throughout the movie that I'll mention. And then anything orange is Charlie. There's not a lot of orange in the movie, but when we first meet Charlie, she's wearing that orange hoodie. And then the last color is everything blue is Paimon or related to him. So now that we know that he's blue, let's talk about the blue light a little bit. I think the blue light, and people could interpret it differently, but this is my favorite way of believing it. So I think it's an extension of Paimon or his powers throughout the movie, because we learn that he is in Charlie to start. So it's kind of weird that like, why would he be a light if he's inside Charlie? But Charlie is not a complete vessel because she's female. So there is this part of Paimon that's still outside, or maybe it's just a representation of his power. And then the most important time this is shown in the movie is after Peter falls out of the window and that light lands right on his back. And that's when it shows that Paimon has officially possessed Peter. And the other time, when the blue paint, it's blue paint that falls over in Annie's workshop. Right before that happens, she stands up and we see a blue light kind of come down from her shoulder, from behind her where the window is, and then it goes in front of her. And if you notice, she doesn't touch anything on the table. The blue paint just spills by itself. So that's Paimon spilling the blue paint so that it'll hit the note with Joan's name on it, so she will call. And then guess what other color paints there are in the scene?
Tell me.
Yellow and red. So Ellen and the cult. But the blue one is the one that's spilled.
Do you think, so I don't know if you're going to get into this or just speculate, but do you think the reason you see the blue light with Charlie a little bit and then after she dies, it's kind of a wandering light, was she like incorrectly infused with Paimon because she's the quote unquote wrong body and the cult had to kill her in order to release Paimon so he could inhabit the correct body? Is that kind of what this movie has been about the whole time?
That is 1,000% exactly what the movie is about.
I finally understand.
That is it. And we could talk a little bit how Paimon got into Charlie's body and why it wasn't Peter's body, which I'll get to. But that's what it is. Paimon is in the wrong body. He needs a male vessel. So Charlie has to die, and then they bring the spirit back into Peter. And then Paimon officially has a vessel that's suitable for him.
And this makes sense, because when it comes to allowing a male demon to possess someone, I just feel like women would never.
That's true. Oh, there's so much about women in this movie too. I can't. It's so good. But before we get there, we're jumping ahead. Let's talk about the coolest thing about the light. So I mentioned the scene with the paint spill, and this is important because right when Annie stands up, right before the paint falls over, she's wearing that little like magnifying glass thing that she wears to see her miniatures, and she flips it up, right? And you see when she flips it up, this little bit of light kind of like hit it and shine off of it, and you realize, think about the way the blue light moves. It moves the same way as light being reflected through a large lens would onto something, because it's kind of like circular and it zooms in and out and it moves like smoothly like that. Really, it's giving you the visual idea that Hyman is looking through his own little magnifying glass into the dollhouse that is the Graham family life and watching them do all of this stuff.
And like focusing on them.
Yeah, focusing on them or focusing on cult members or trying to lead them certain ways or making things happen. So that is the blue light is Pyman, and he is watching the family. And I just think it's so cool.
And I definitely never caught that, like both watches. I thought it was the grandmother's ghost.
Which, I mean, she's present in the movie too, especially in the background. You see some like white things and you're like, oh, is that a headless Ellen haunting the background? But no, she is more physically present, where Payman is more of a light. So, but that's some of the symbolism. Let's talk about what Payman actually is. So he is something that exists in the world in the sense that he is in literature and grimoires and things like that. So he is a real spirit or devil, fallen angel, a king of hell that's mentioned throughout various texts in history. These include E.A. Coding's Work of Darkness, Aleister Crowley's version of the Lesser Key of Solomon, and the Gothia. That's just to name a couple of the places where he comes into, but those are the ones where the movie draws probably the most inspiration. In the movie specifically, they reference him as the 8th king of hell who lives in the capital city of Pandamonia.
You know, I love a good Lesser Key of Solomon reference. This is fantastic.
You can't go wrong with it. And some of those words that you see in the movie come from these grimoires as well. So they are real words that look like gibberish, but they're real words. Like we mentioned, in the story, Payman is born into Charlie's body, but he needs a male host to fully exist. Ari Aster states clearly that Payman was always Charlie. He says there was a girl, but she was displaced at the very beginning, like almost immediately after her birth. The entire time we see Charlie, she is not a human. She is Payman. So that leads for some weird moments, right, in the movie, where Charlie seems kind of human. So you're like, well, why is she afraid of her death if she's Payman the whole time? Or why is she kind of like infant? But it's because Payman is this devil who's being reborn into an infant bodies with a child's mind. So he has a period of relearning. And then he's also born into a female body. So it's an improper vessel. So he's kind of he's a little uneasy. There's this period of relearning. Nothing's perfect, but it's never Charlie. It's always Payman.
It's such I don't even know how to wrap my mind around that. I see, like, the movie is completely different than what I thought.
It is. And it makes the death of Charlie a completely different thing. And it's crazy because it's foreshadowed all the way in the beginning when the dad goes up into the treehouse. I wanted to call it a birdhouse because birds are important in this movie too. But into the treehouse, and he says, "You're gonna catch pneumonia up here," and Charlie goes, "That's okay." Knowing that she has to die to become the real Payman. So it's just crazy. And so we learn in the movie, if you're paying attention to the details, specifically the pictures at the end, that Ellen has entered into this marriage with Payman, and he's agreed to sacrifice her family in order to restore Payman to Peter's body in exchange for knowledge and wealth. That's what Payman gives. Mostly it's knowledge. That's like his thing. Obviously they show wealth in the movie too, but it's a wealth of knowledge is what he's known for. And you can see that marriage happens when that picture where she's dressed in all white in a wedding dress with a veil and they're like dropping money on her. That's her being married. That's her ceremony.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's kind of cool, huh?
It's wild.
It is. So let's talk a little bit about Payman's original form, because it'll tell you more about like some of the things, like the clicking in the movie, for example. Of course, it varies depending on which grimoire or what text you read, but some of them say he's a bird-like creature, probably because he's a fallen angel. And there's 3 kinds of birds that show up in this movie, and there's details that go into every kind of bird and what they mean. Go watch a YouTube video if you want all of that. It's really cool here. The other thing is he doesn't speak a human language unless commanded to do so. That's some of his lore. So you have to tell him to speak human or he won't. So he's a bird, insect, pestilence creature. And when he possesses Charlie, Peter, and Annie, because at some point he possesses all three of them, we hear that like gurgling or croaking noise. That's him speaking his like native language. Also, Ari Aster did a Ask Me Anything on Reddit, and someone asked about the clicking noise. In the response to that, he called it a clucking noise. And I don't know if you've ever heard anything cluck besides a bird, but I've only heard birds cluck.
That's interesting, but I'm also currently stuck on my fan theory that Paimon is a kinku from D&D.
A kinku. That's ridiculous. Sure.
Is it any more ridiculous than what we're talking about right now?
No, not at all. Not at all. Speaking of things that these noises are similar to, they're also similar to insect noises. Insects are a huge theme throughout this movie, and it's used in the ants, the flies, it's everywhere. And really the point of the insects throughout the movie is just to show the death, decay, and pestilence that follows Paimon around. So when you see the insects, it's just that he's there. He also has various abilities that are mentioned briefly in the movie, but there's two that I think are most notable. The first is that he has knowledge and can answer like all questions and has like, and that's why people seek him out. But he also has this ability to infiltrate the deeper mind of the human being, so the subconscious of the human being. And I think that's where we see Annie's sleepwalking play a big part. I think a lot of that sleepwalking was controlled through his possession or influenced by him. And there's more about that in the YouTube video, so go watch it. One other thing about Paimon is he's known as the King of the Northwest. And this is shown a ton throughout the movie. So on your rewatch, watch this. But it even goes so deeply. Guess what the name of the high school is?
I did not notice.
It's West High School. So this is like alluding to the fact that probably a lot of the people that run this school are part of the cult. Like this cult is everywhere in this movie, in so many more places than you think. And then there's symbols I mentioned throughout this whole movie of like compasses that point northwest, or the image in the book, he's holding a hand and it's pointing to the northwest. So it's just he's the king of the Northwest. You look to the northwest to call him back. The cult members mention it a couple times. It's just his thing. Speaking of symbols, that sigil we see throughout the movie.
I need to know. I've restrained myself for this moment. I didn't look it up. I've been dying to.
It is the actual sigil of Paimon. That's his sigil. The movie makes one artistic liberty with it. The original symbol has 4 circles on the top. In the movie, they make it 3. There's a really important reason they make it 3. The idea of the Trinity is incredibly present in this movie, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But that's what it is. It is the literal symbol of Paimon. Does that help you?
It does. I just where like in
Why?
what like is it a language? Like is it because it looked like almost I thought it looked like Sanskrit or something like that.
Well, that's a great question. I don't have that answer. Like, why is it 4
Not to put you on the
circles
spot.
above and what's the
Yeah.
language? I don't have that. I'm so sorry. I have
No,
so
that's
much
okay.
more. But it is just his sigil as far as I know.
Okay.
But I'm sure you could find more. And we see that in the book that Annie finds in her box, in the box of her mom's old stuff. And it's just that book, it's got a lot of information about Paimon. It is various texts from those 3 grimoires I mentioned earlier. And it has a few illustrations of him as well. The one illustration, so Paimon is often depicted as an androgynous figure riding a camel with a crown on his head. That's his thing. The movie makes one change where they do place 3 heads hanging from his pocket in that picture, and that's to symbolize the sacrifice that he needs from the 3 generations of women in that family. Yeah. And that's where we start to get hit over the head a little bit with that symbolism of 3.
But also, and maybe it's because she was his bride, but he let Ellen get off easy because she died of natural causes and he had to like murder the other 2.
That's true. But she
maybe
did willingly sell herself to him, but also is slowly dying of dementia, getting off easy.
Yeah, I don't know if you're right. I would never describe that as getting off easy, but it wasn't a violent death. Like her
That's true.
Her beheading came after.
That's true. I would say Charlie's was well, no, because she's like, yeah, they're all pretty brutal. Actually,
Yeah.
there's not a good one in the
That's
bunch.
true, because Charlie was suffocating. Nope, they all suffered horribly.
Yeah, they all suck. Yeah.
I do not, in fact, have to hand it to Paimon.
Yes. No, there's nothing good about Paimon. He clearly tricks all these people and belongs in hell. There's no doubt there. Yeah, there's other little symbols of 3 throughout the movie. In the beginning, when we see Charlie in the treehouse, she's wearing 3 blue rings of blue thread. And then I think the triangle in Ellen's room is also symbolizing the trilogy, where it's just 3 instead of a pentagram. I think that's part of the symbolism here. So let's talk about the 3. Why 3 heads? Why 3 sacrifices of women, specifically women that have to lose their heads? We have to look at throughout history and art, women losing their heads is a representation of them sacrificing themselves and their bodies for men and their families. It has been forever. There's hundreds and thousands of examples of it throughout art and history. So it's used here as this disintegration of their feminine selves, just this complete giving up of themselves. It's also tied into this additional gender norm that we see presented in this movie, that women are crazy or mental illness is originally something that's characterized through women.
Which is definitely a theme present in a lot of art.
A ton of art. And I think we're seeing a rise of it too, speaking of art, in horror movies as well, where we're seeing this symbolism of mental illness in women, but we're exploring it more deeply. So it's really cool, where in the past it was just like...
It was like a trope, yeah.
Yeah. We're changing it to bring awareness to it, but in the past it's more of a gross thing. Incorrect gendering norms is obviously a huge subtext of this movie, as Paimon was born into the wrong body. He needs a male host. The women are sacrificing themselves for men. It's this whole gendering norm, the characteristic of women. It's just a huge part of this movie. But specifically, so that's kind of the symbolism of why these 3 women, why the way they were going to go was to lose their heads. But also, so let's talk about the Holy Trinity. So obviously this is something that is tied to Christianity. For anyone not familiar, the Holy Trinity is Jesus Christ, God, and the Holy Ghost. It's kind of weird that Paimon would need that, as he is very anti-Christian, but I think there's a little symbolism or giveaway as to why the Trinity was used at the very end of the movie when they're in the treehouse. When you look at the statue of Paimon, which is just that wooden figure with it's Charlie's head on it and a crown on top of Charlie's head, he has his hand down, so the wooden hand is facing down in that very famous Christian symbol where Jesus is holding his 3 fingers up to represent the Holy Trinity, but it's reversed, so it's showing down. So there's a couple reversals happening here.
Now, does it only show him down, or does it show him up and down? Because I know to do that same 3-finger thing where you're pointing down and up, that is from the occult. That's occult imagery. Specifically, you see it specifically in imagery of Baphomet and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, he was just holding it.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't up to. In his other hand, so in his one hand was down doing the symbol, and then in his other hand he was holding that hand that was pointing to the northwest. So That's what the other one's doing. Just like the picture that they see in that book. So let's talk about the reverse of the Holy Trinity. Instead of the original Holy Trinity, it's male, right? Or at least male oriented, where reverse of that would be female. So that's why the sacrifice needed to be female. And also at the very end, when Joan is worshiping Paimon after he comes back in Peter's body, she says, "We reject this Trinity." So those are the tiebacks to the Christian Holy Trinity. But there's also
I remember her saying that.
Yeah. There's a lot at the end that the first time you watch it, you're like, what the F is she?
Because there's just so much going on. You're like, what is happening?
But after you listen to this and you go back and watch that 4-hour YouTube video, it's basically like reading a children's book. You're like, oh, well, duh. But yeah, you have to do a little digging to get it.
More horror movies need primers. I keep saying this.
I don't know, but I love it. It's why I love them. But let's talk about, female Trinity. What does that make you think of?
Hecate.
Kind of. You're going in the right direction, yes. It is the idea of the pagan triple goddess, which we see throughout history and in multiple religions, but it's the image of the triple female. Pretty much every time it represents the maiden, the mother, and the crone, the three stages of the female life, which is pre-child, having a child when you're old and can't have children anymore. Where you see it most commonly now is in the practice of witchcraft or Wicca. I do want to stress that I'm not saying pagans worship Satan or that Wicca is Satan based. I am saying that in this movie, that's what they use it for. Especially because we're looking at historic representations in artwork and we're talking about a cult that is worshiping a devil. So we do see, and throughout history, there's tons of famous paintings where you see like witches in the forest and they're surrounding or worshiping a horned figure, right? Or some kind of devil figure. But what's important is that the reason these women are doing it almost all of the time is to use that figure to gain power in a male-dominated world where women are mistreated, mislabeled, misused, abused. So that's kind of the story here. They're looking for escape from that, but they're doing it by sacrificing themselves to a man. Huh, shocker.
Right. Because, like, a goat demon in the woods who gives you powers starts to look real good when frickin' Archibald won't stop hitting you or whatever.
Exactly. Okay, so really, like, that's it. That's the story. The story is that Payman needed a male person to inherit it. Ellen said it can be from her bloodline. However, Annie did not allow Ellen to be around when her son was born. She did allow her to be around when her daughter was born. And this is where we see that they were destined for this to happen because of the cult members' involvement and Payman's involvement, literally starting from the birth of Charlie until the end of this movie. And I'll go through it really quick. There's more on it in the YouTube, but one thing that really drives us home is the literature that they talk about in Peter's class. The professor of Peter's class is 1,000% a cult member, I have no doubt, because everything that's happening in Peter's life, they're talking about in class.
That absolutely tracks.
Yeah. The first thing they talk about is the story of Heracles, which the point of that story, you could go read it if you want, but it's just that Heracles is given this warning that he ignores, that his fate is doomed and he's going to die no matter what he does. And to give you a little bit more about it, his wife accidentally kills him because she's jealous that he fell in love with a younger lover, sends him a cloak that she thinks is a love potion, turns out to be poison, kills him, she kills herself. They're doomed from the start.
Classic tragedy.
But the tragedy itself doesn't have much to do with it. It's just this idea that you're doomed no matter what you do and you have no control over it. And then the scene when Peter bangs his head against the desk that we talked about, they're talking about Agamemnon and his daughter. Iphigenia is her name. She's a daughter of Agamemnon, and she's sacrificed to the goddess Artemis before the sack of Troy. And in some stories, she's unaware that the sacrifice is going to happen and thinks instead she's going to be married to Achilles. So there's a lot of like lines drawn here, similarities between what's happening in Peter's life and Ellen sacrificing herself to this demon and all of this that's happening in Peter's life. And then most importantly is written on the board in this scene is punishment brings wisdom, which is just another like you have to be punished. You're gonna get the knowledge after your punishment. You'll be rewarded.
And I gotta remember to read the chalkboards more because this happened in Candyman too.
It does happen in Candyman too. And it's just, yeah, read the chalkboards. There's a lot of information there. So speaking of cult members, so we've established just right now that his professor's a cult member. Let's go. This is the last scene I'll talk about, and then you'll see that their fates were for sure. It was just going to happen the way it was happened. The girls chopping the nuts at the party. Did you ever wonder, like, why are they chopping so many nuts? Did you think that? Like, it was an egregious amount of nuts for a party.
It did seem like entirely too many nuts. And I don't often say that. Wait, no, I say that all the time. I don't. You know what?
I don't know.
You decide if I say that enough or not.
Depends on the day, I think.
Yes, it depends on the day. It was entirely too much.
Yes. And when they're doing it like really happy and enthusiastically. And guess what colors they're wearing? Red and blue. So you can assume they know exactly what's going to happen. And this is the coolest little attention to detail thing ever. When they're chopping the nuts, if you put that scene and the scene where Annie bashes her head against the ceiling next to each other, it is at the exact same cadence. Isn't that insane?
I think I'm going to need another scrummet break.
I know, it's insane. I know. It's gross. It's But it's crazy. The attention to detail is crazy. And it's confirmed that it was purposely shot that way. Like they put the two scenes next to each other to make sure that the timing was exactly the same.
And that's kind of like a callback to old like spells or rituals where you're trying to manifest something, I don't know, powerful or evil or whatever. And you have these like material ingredients and you're putting your intent into them. But like to do that, with the nuts that kill her kid and the cadence to which she is breaking down later, like, oh my gosh, layer cake indeed, Charlie.
Yes, it's crazy. Also, one other small detail here, when Peter goes into the room to smoke the weed, I don't know if you noticed, but the two boys are watching a video. That video is a beheading. It's a clip of a beheading.
No, I didn't notice that.
Yep, so go back and check that out. And then, so the girl he's crushing on is Bridget. Her last name, which we see when she pulls up her Facebook picture later on a computer, it's Bridget Mulpey. Mulpey is a siren in Greek mythology.
Oh,
so she is very obviously part of the cult too, and she also wears red and blue the whole time.
That is wild.
Isn't it crazy? Okay, so there's like one or two other things really quick that the cult is interfering on. So obviously the cult set up the entire scene, the death for Charlie. They put the deer in the road so Peter would swerve. They knew which pole he would hit. They knew she would have the allergic reaction, all of it. They set it up. They also slip Peter a little leaf, and it's called the Dittany of Crete, and they give it to him in this scene in the party and when he's smoking under the bleachers where he has that panic attack. And
so it's in the joint?
It's in the joint, yeah. It's in the bowl that he's smoking. And it's the same one that Annie has in her mouth when she's drinking the tea with Joan. And if you look at one of the pictures of Ellen holding Charlie when she's a baby, she's feeding her a small black herb. So she was feeding it. That's why feeding Charlie was so important, because what this plant is the Dittany of Crete. It is known to lessen the spirit so that it is more susceptible to possession. So all three of them needed to have it so they could be possessed. And yeah, so that's just some examples of how they were doomed. It was going to happen. Nothing they could do would have stopped it. So yeah, at the end, the whole end where we see, is it madness? Is it Annie going crazy, or is it her being possessed? It's her being possessed. And every time you mentioned a few times where it looks like they were swallowing something, that's literally Paimon trying to enter their body through their mouths. Or in the case of Charlie, really coming out of it.
That's what I thought. And then the reference to the air flexing, I assumed that was Paimon kind of trying to manifest, and then that swallowing thing was him entering. Yes. And it's a little like, it's not explicit or like very detailed as far as explanation, but you understand it still, and it's creepy.
Right. It's super creepy. Yeah. And if you notice, every time they do that too, there's a blue light. There's almost always a blue light. So, but yeah, so that's Hereditary, and it's brilliant. There's so much more to it, but it would take 4 hours.
I mean, I can tell this is already going to be a longer one for us, I think.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, listeners. Sorry.
No, it's what they signed up for.
It's true.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I already know the answer to this, but what is this movie? Is it horror or sad or something else?
This movie is, well, I mean, it's sad, but it's also horrifically horrific horror. And I love it. I just love it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I agree. It's definitely horror. It's horrific horror, like you said. It's a layer cake of horror, like you said. There is sadness that is interwoven kind of at every moment.
Yes.
But they're not in control, and they never were.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, this movie also, we didn't even have time to talk about it. It's a really good example of grief. It's a really good allegory of grief and all of that too. We didn't touch on abuse that much. There's so much more on the abuse side of it too. There's so much to this movie, and it's just, everything's so intentional and perfect. But
it is good. I'm definitely going to have to watch it again. And also, yes. I wonder, like, how many PhDs were involved in the writing of this movie?
That's a great question. Or is Ari Aster just an absolute genius? I don't know. We'll have to look into it. But all right, I think that does it for us today. So may the horrors persist.
Don't let your grandma join a cult. Thanks for listening to Horror Sandbox. For show notes, credits, and contact information, check out our website at www.horrorsandbox.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Horror Sandbox. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with all the horror fans in your life.
What's